Hi everybody, and thank you for joining us at the Microsoft Power BI UK user group. I'm your host Leon Gordon, and we're back for another opportunity to learn more about the universe that we call and we love Power BI. In today's session, we're going to be having the Power BI API Extravaganza with Rui Romano. We want this to be a fantastically interactive session, so the Q&A will be open. We'd love to hear where you're dialing in from, and obviously you can ask questions throughout. With that being said, I'll just give you a brief introduction to Rui, and then I'll hand over to him for his session. So most of you know Rui Romano and are familiar with him because he's a senior program manager at Microsoft within the Power BI CAT team. Rui is passionate about data and a frequent speaker on Microsoft events and user groups. Rui also lives in Portugal and works as a senior program manager at Microsoft, as we mentioned, in the Power BI CAT team. So Rui, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you. Let me share my screen. Oh, I'm already sharing my screen. So this is me. Leon already introduced me. Thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be on this user group. So my name is Rui Romano. I'm from Portugal. I'm a member of the Power BI CAT team. So what I usually do, or what we do as a team, is working with the largest customers, the largest Power BI implementations, learning from them, curating their problems to the product group, and trying to bring back a solution to the customer, but most importantly, to scale that solution to other customers or to everyone else. You can follow me. I'm usually more active on Twitter and LinkedIn. And I'm a Power BI addict, so I've worked with Power BI since its inception, and 15 years working on Microsoft and the business intelligence data stack. So enough about me. So the session today is called Power BI API Extravaganza. All the content, the slides, the demos, they are all online. So you can go to my GitHub. I have a repo called Session Slides, and there will be there the slides of this session. And during this, on the slides, there are links to the content that you can download and try yourself. So this is not a Power BI introduction. Have that in mind. So I'm assuming that everyone that is watching knows Power BI. It will be 100% focused on the REST APIs. So that's why it's Power BI API Extravaganza, and this is usually my style. So I don't like to focus a lot on the details and slowly demonstrate how I build those demos. So I usually just demo it. You have the content, you can download it, you can try it yourself, you can ask me questions after the session by using Twitter or LinkedIn. I will do my best to help you, but always focus on the possibilities. Okay, if this is useful for you, even if you don't know how to write PowerShell, that you will see a lot during the session, maybe you can find someone that can, or you can learn it, of course. But what the most important thing is knowing that it's possible to do a certain thing, and then it's just a matter of learning the technology or finding someone inside your company or a consultant that can help you do it. Okay. So what are the Power BI REST APIs? So Power BI REST APIs, they exist since the creation of Power BI, since day one. It keeps growing. So nowadays you have a lot more APIs than 5 years ago, and you can do a lot of stuff with this. So you can manage your Power BI content. As a Power BI admin, you can run admin operations like getting information about everything that exists inside of the tenant, creating capacities, assigning permissions to a workspace as an admin. So without having access to the workspace, but if you are an admin, you can add other users or even yourself to a workspace. So you can run admin operations. You can do monitoring. It's one of the most used use cases, just to monitor what's happening inside your tenant. Automation. So if you have a task, for example, publishing a Power BI file, that you do it manually, you can automate that. You can even do some kind of DevOps experience using the REST APIs. You can also do real-time. You have the push data sets and the streaming data sets. You can automate the creation of a data set and push data in real time to that data set. And you can also do embedding. So the embedding, it will be out of the scope of this session. The others I will try to demo and give you some examples of what you can do with us with REST APIs. So, and in the slides, there is a link to the documentation that, in my opinion, is really good. So you can come here and you can see all the sorts of operations available by category. For example, admin APIs, all the admin APIs. You can click on the API. You can see the type of request that you need to do. If it is a get, a post, a patch, a delete, and then you can the URL that you need to call. And in here, one thing that you can also do that is really nice, for example, let's do it on a simpler one, get groups, for example. So the get groups or workspaces, by the way, groups was the first name of the workspace nowadays. Nowadays we call it workspace, but for legacy purposes, probably it's still named groups in here. So if I want to get all the workspaces that I have access in my tenant, I can call this API, and it will just return a JSON with the groups that I have access. And what's nice about this documentation page, it's not only describes the API, it describes the parameters that you can pass to the API. For example, the groups API allows you to pass a filter, a skip, a top, and it will also show you an example of the payload of the response of the API. So I know that this is what I could expect from the API response. But what you can also do, which is pretty nice, is you can try it. So you can click here and you can authenticate with your Power BI account, and then you can provide the parameters. So these parameters over here if you want, or you can just run it, and it will show you the data from your tenant. So this will show the reply, in this case, the workspaces of my tenant. It's not dummy data. This is actually from my tenant. It's using my account that I authenticated with. It didn't show the authentication because I'm already authenticated. And it will show the response of that API. So the documentation, more time, the slides are on the slides. There is the link for the documentation. And if you want to know all about all these APIs that are available to you, this is the place to go. Okay, this is where even the Power BI team, whenever they create a new API, it will show up in here. Okay, so I already showed you this. So how can you play with the APIs? How can you learn? How can you see what's the parameters? What if you call it? How can you try things like, okay, if I call it with a specific value on a parameter, so you can do it directly on the page. You don't need to run any code. You don't need to use any tool. You can do it directly on the page. Now, how can you work with APIs? So first of all, now, if you want to do something with the APIs, you need to be comfortable with some type of coding or automation. You can even use some low-code experience like Power Automate, but normally it's the APIs they are using in applications with .NET, Java, or they are using in scripts, PowerShell, Python, R. So any language that can make an HTTP request, it will work, okay? Because in the end, this is just get and posts for it's HTTP requests to the API. And there are multiple libraries and packages that you can use. I put 3 examples in here. So you have the PowerShell, you have the official Microsoft Power BI PowerShell commandlets. You have another one called Power BI PS. This one is close to my heart because I was the creator of this module before the Microsoft official one. I'm no longer investing on that module because it doesn't make sense. And there is an official one, and the official one will it even does some things that the mine doesn't. For example, it works. You can call it in a Linux or Mac. It's not Windows dependent. You have the Python, and you also have a .NET NuGet that you can just use on your .NET applications. We are going to use PowerShell. So if you are not comfortable, if you are not familiar with PowerShell, maybe something will sound strange, but it's just a scripting language. One more time, don't focus on the details. I don't know how to write code. Don't worry, so someone will know. Just focus on what you can do. That's the most important thing. Okay, so don't be scared. So let me show you how can you use that PowerShell module. So I'm going to use Visual Studio Code to show the code, but you can in PowerShell you can use even. I recommend to use Visual Studio Code, but for example, you could use another tool that is installed on any virtual any Windows machine that it's called PowerShell ESA. That when you have a PowerShell script, if you edit, it will open that tool. So it's this one over here. But I usually prefer the PowerShell, the Visual Studio Code. So the first thing that you need to do is import the module. So the module is already installed on my machine, but a way to install it is just writing install module and the name of the module, and this will install. And you only need to run this once. This will install on your laptop or your server the Microsoft PowerShell module. By the way, all of this is documented. So if you click on the link of the module over here, I should have shown this. This will take you to the PowerShell gallery. It will tell you what you need to do to install the module, the version, when it was last updated. You can even jump to the project site. It's on GitHub, and you can even learn more about how to install the different versions of the module. Okay, you import your module, and the first thing that you need to do is you need to connect with your Power BI account. So there is this commandlet called Connect Power BI Service Account. So you just run it, and when you do this, this will ask for your Power BI account. You just log in. And after that, you are logged in with your Power BI account. So now you can use the out-of-the-box commandlet. So there are a ton of them. So for example, you have a get Power BI workspace. That these commandlets, they are basically a wrapper over the Power BI API. You can just call it, and this will return all the workspaces that you have access with your account. But you can also, because you don't have a command like this for every API. So there are a ton of them, but if Power BI releases a new API, you won't see a command for that new API. But you have another one that is really important. It's the invoke Power BI REST method, and this one you can call. It will basically reuse the authentication that you just did using the Connect Power BI service account, and you can call whatever API you want. So, and in this case, if I want to get exactly the same result, I would call invoke Power BI REST method. It's a get method, and then I'm just using some standard PowerShell code like convert the result to JSON and getting a specific value, and this will show exactly the same thing, but now I'm using the invoke Power BI REST method and not this one. And now, how do you get here? How do you know what to write on the URL? It's easy. So you go to the documentation, and on the documentation, this is the URL that you need to call. So this part is the API. So you don't need to provide this because this is the same. So that this is embedded inside the PowerShell module. But this is what you need to call. Well, for example, if you want to call another API, let's say you want to list the data sets. So get data sets in group. This is the part that you need to call. So you need to call groups / the group ID, the workspace ID slash datasets and the dataset ID if you want to get the details for a specific dataset. And in here, there will be some important information like if the ID, the name of the dataset, if it is refreshable or not, if who was the person that configured this dataset. So let's go back to the code. So in here, so for example, this one I'm calling to get the data sets inside of a group. So it's groups, the ID of the group, workspaces, the ID of the workspace, and then data sets. And this will return, let's execute, this will return all the data sets that exist inside of that workspace. Okay. So, and another thing that you can also do is you can also call the APIs as an admin. So if you are an admin, if I want to list all the workspaces inside of my tenant, not only the workspace that exists that I have access, you can, if you put on the requests this parameter organization all, this will return, this will execute the API as an admin. But this, you need to be an admin. Okay. Now, so this is just some standard PowerShell code, showing how to call the API. So one thing that I want to call out is the authentication, and this is normally the most complicated part to get started with the API, because yes, you can use your own account. You are a Power BI developer. You can do what I just did. By calling the API, it will prompt you for a credential, and then you will use that credential. That's perfectly fine. But if you want to have a script that will run on the server, you won't be there to input the credential. So you won't be there to get that prompt window that will ask you what's your username and password. So the normal use case or the normal procedure is create something that is called a service principal. And a service principal, it's basically a user, but it's a user that that you can put on a script, and it's not something that you can authenticate to the service. So you can use the APIs with the service principal. Of course, that someone needs to authorize that service principal to get access to the workspaces or to get admin access. And one of the things that, and I really want to show, because I see a lot of in customers, I see a lot of confusion about this, and I want to show how to create a service principal and how can you use that service principal on the script. So, but before that, this is using OAuth 2.0. I'm not an expert in OAuth 2.0. I like to think that OAuth is like a dance between a client application or a script and an authentication provider and a web API, and they basically dance between each other. So they talk, the application will talk with the identity provider to say, okay, I want a token for this web API, and they will exchange some secrets, and in the end, they get a token. So, and this is the most important thing on OAuth, is getting this token, and with this token, that normally has an expiration date. Normally, it's 1 hour. It could be a day. With this access token, you can just call the API by providing that access token, and it will just work. So you don't need to go again to the Azure Active Directory, that is the authentication provider or the identity provider, to get a new token until the token expires. So that's why Service Principal is also way more secure than using your own username and password, because this always have an expiration date. Okay, so, and this is called the authentication flow, and there is a link to explain this a little bit better. It's called Client Credentials Authentication Flow. The one we just did, that prompt me for the authentication, is called the authorization code. Okay. So let me show you how to create a service principal, and I think I can do it in 5 minutes. Because there are some myths about this authentication, this service principal. People sometimes go crazy and create and give all sorts of permissions because they try it just after the creation, and sometimes this takes a little bit of time to get propagated, and you don't need to do it. So let me show you. So to create a service principal, you go to your Azure portal, and you click on Azure Active Directory. And in here, so I really need to zoom it to really show you have a link called App Registrations. You click here, and then you just need to create a new registration. So you click on New Registration. Normally, so especially on large companies, this is blocked, so you need to ask someone to do it. But there are, maybe you can also create it yourself. So this is a configuration in the Active Directory. An admin can allow or not allow anyone to create applications or service principals. So you just click on New Registration, and then you create a service principal. Let's call it as principal UK user group, and leave everything as default, by default. You don't need to do anything in here. So you click on Register, and now the service principal is created, and you can take a note, and you should take a note of the following: the application ID, open Notepad, so the application ID. You also should take note of the tenant ID. This is your Azure AD tenant ID, and you need to do another thing. You need to go to the certificates and secrets, and a service principal can have multiple secrets, and you need to generate a new secret, so new client secret. The secret also, you can apply an expiration date. You can put it an infinite expiration date. So if this is a developer token, let's put 3 months. You give it a name. You click Add, and you need to save this value over here. This will be the secret. Okay, this is like a password. If you don't save it now, you will lose it. So save this, and the service principal is created. Okay, now if you try to use that service principal now, let's try. So you go to your scripts, and in here I already have a placeholder, some variables. So the app ID, the tenant ID, and the secret. And now you need to do a different thing. So instead of calling Connect Power BI Service Account directly, you need to create, and this is a PowerShell specific thing, a credential object with these variables. And you call the Connect Power BI Service Account, but now you need to use this switch statement here, service principal, because now this is the service principal. Let's run it. And you will notice a difference between now and before. Now it didn't prompt me for anything. It just did, okay, that service principal exists. You have a valid secret. So if you put a wrong secret in here, I think it will fail. Yeah, it will fail because the secret is invalid. Let's put it back together. So the service principal is okay. It works. But if I try to get the power, to use the get Power BI workspace, the commandlet again, it will fail. It will fail. Why? Because I just created a service principal. I didn't allow this service principal to execute the APIs. So that's the second step that you need to do. So you need to go to your, in this case, you need to go to the Power BI, application, at powerbi.com, and this needs to be done by the admin. So the Power BI admin, not the global admin in the company, the Power BI admin. So you go as a Power BI admin. If you are a Power BI admin, you can do it yourself. If you are not a Power BI admin, you need to ask the Power BI admin to do it. You go to the admin portal, and in here there is the tenant settings, and there is a tenant setting called allow service principals to use Power BI APIs, and you need to add the service principal here. Unfortunately, you cannot add in here a service principal directly. You need to add it through a security group. So that's another step that you need to do. So you need to go back to the Azure Active Directory. You need to go to groups, and in groups, you will find, I already have a security group. It's called PBI Settings Service Principal. By the way, this is also a best practice. So every time, and I also see this so sometimes people create a security group and they use the same security group in all the tenant settings. What I recommend is every time you change a service setting, a tenant setting, create a security group for that tenant setting. So in here I have a PBI settings service principals, PBI settings query principals. For example, let me show you another one that is very used. Create workspaces. I have a PBI settings workspace creator. So I have a security group for each tenant setting. This is a good best practice. So don't use the same security group and put everything there, because that will be insecure. So PBI service principals. Let's go in here and search for it. So PBI settings service principals, and I need to add the service principal we created. It's called SP UK user group inside of this tenant setting. And now, because I just did that, the service principal is allowed to execute the APIs. And sometimes this takes a while, and that's where I see people go crazy, because what they do is it didn't work, and what people usually do is go here. Go to the because it will still get that unauthorized error, and they go here to API permissions and they click on add permission. They search for Power BI and they authorize everything and add permissions, and you don't need it. You don't need to authorize anything else. So the only thing that you need to do is to put the service principal in this tenant setting, and after that, if I call it again, it will work. But now it's not returning anything. Why? It's not returning anything because I can call the API, but I don't have access to any workspace. So what you need to do after this is, okay, the service principal, for example, needs to have access to a workspace. It will manage that workspace. For example, publish content about that workspace. You need to give access to the service principal. You need to come here and UK SP UK user group. And now if I add the service principal as a member, and let's go back again and call it, this now is returning that workspace. Okay. So service principals, as a recap, is you register the service principal, you generate a secret, you save that, you can create or reuse an Azure Active Directory security group, you add a service principal to the security group, and you allow the service principal to execute the operations that you want the service principal to execute. If the service principal, for example, is going to use the admin APIs, you have another tenant setting that it's called allow service principals to use read-only Power BI admin APIs. Okay. And that's it. You don't need to do anything else. You don't need to add permissions. You don't need to go crazy. This is what you need to do. Okay. Maybe it was a little bit longer than 5 minutes, but it's as simple as this. The challenge is normally is having the permissions to do it. That's normally the challenge. But my recommendation is, whenever you need to create a service principal, is to gather. Okay, you need to have the Azure Active Directory present, and you need to have the Power BI admin present. So just do a 30-minute call and explain what you want to do. This is the most secure way. Don't use because you can also use on the script your username and password, and you will need to put the username and password on the script. Don't do it. Okay, that's very insecure. And not even the client secret of the service principal. You should use things like Key Vault and that can be an Azure Key Vault or whatever type of Key Vault. But one thing is putting on the Key Vault the password, your username and password, that someone can, if it gets compromised, someone can log into Power BI and see the dashboards and change stuff. Another thing is getting a service principal that, for example, there is no way for a service principal to access the Power BI tenant as an admin without as a read-only. So they can. If it gets compromised, they can scan the whole tenant, but it's a read-only operation, and you can just invalidate the secret. So this is way more secure. It's a best practice. Okay, this is very, I know, a little bit boring, but I think it's important to get these concepts about service principals and the REST APIs. So now let's go. And I think we have like 30 minutes, right?
Yeah, that's correct, Rui. Would you like to pause now for some questions, or would you like to wait until the end?
I can pause for some questions, yes.
Okay, we have a few queued up. That's all. So we have an anonymous question. An anonymous person asking a question, and they say, "Is there a REST API to get the list of all workspaces over which a data set is published?"
Yes, you have. I think I have a demo for that. Let me just confirm because I'm always changing the slides. I have a demo for that. Okay, let's just I will remember that question and I will show how to do it. You don't have a specific API for that, but you have a way to get to the same answer.
Excellent, thank you. The next question comes in from Grant, and Grant asks, "Is there a REST API to monitor content being stored in people's personal workspaces?" As he worries that he has lots of live reports in people's personal Power BI workspaces.
Also have a demo for that.
Excellent, you're one step ahead. Next question comes in from David O, and David asks, "Does the invoke activity URL Power BI REST method API call return exactly the same results as the get activity PowerShell commandlet?"
Can you repeat again? Sorry.
No problem at all. So the invoke activity URL Power BI REST method as an API call, does that return exactly the same results as the get activity PowerShell commandlet?
It should. It should. I don't know the details of the implementation, but it should. It's behind the scenes. It's definitely using the same API, but they could, for example, be excluding some new properties that are being returned, but it shouldn't. It could be a bug, but it should use exactly the same API.
Excellent, thank you. And just a couple more, Rui, and then we'll let you continue. This one comes in from Grant. In terms of the service principal, he envisaged that the service principal would have God tier privileges without needing to be added to workspace permissions. Is there anything that can be done to give them God level access across all workspaces without having to add the service principal to every individual workspace?
No. You can the service principal can have access to the admin APIs, but it's just for querying. If you want to make sure that the service principal is on all the workspaces, you don't have a way to do it. What you can do, and I've done it in the past, you can have a script. You can put you can put the service principal inside of a security group. Let's call it the Power BI God of the tenant security group, and you can have a script that runs every day that will loop all the workspaces and ensure the security group that has a service principal is inside of all the workspaces. That's something that you can do. And it will run quickly because you can get, with just one API call, you can get the workspaces and the users inside of the workspaces for the entire tenant. And you just need to loop and see if the security group that you want to make sure that exists inside of the workspace is there. If it is, then don't do anything. If it's not, then call another API as an admin to add the user or the service principal or the security group there. So you have a workaround. It's not exactly what you want, but you can do it. And
excellent, thank you. And then just the last one from Anthony. Is it best placed to add a service principal directly to workspace permissions, or to use a service principal security group as a member for each workspace?
Security group, for sure. Okay, I just add the service principal to the workspace, but just to demo quickly, but I rarely, even users, only if it is the Power BI developer as a Power BI admin, I normally always use security groups. If you can do it, because and especially with service principals, because you can, you might start with one service principal that is generic, and you might want to, in a later stage, to create a service principal for DevOps, a service principal for queries, a service principal for content management. And if you assign the service principal directly, you need to need to change the code, and you need to change you need to go over the workspaces again and change the permissions. And if it is a security group, you don't. So the recommendation is always security groups.
Excellent. Thank you, Rui. That's all for now.
Okay, let's go. Let's see if I can do all the demos. So the first API that I'm going to showcase to show you a demo. It's for me, it's my favorite one. I think it's the coolest API from all. It's called the Execute Queries API. This is an API that allows you. It's a REST API. So you don't need to use any XMLA provider or ADOMD or AMO. It's a API, REST API, that you can call and execute the DAX query on a data set and get back the results. So, and the reason why I think this is very, very cool is the first time I learned about this API, my mind was like blowing with ideas of things that you can do. You can do all sorts of stuff with this. So you can do data integration. You can have a data factory, or you can have a script that go and get data from Power BI data sets, data that is treated, that data that is already with the KPIs that you implemented on the Power BI data set, and snapshot it and store it on the database. Be in mind, so don't go crazy and just extract the Power BI is not a database to extract data, it's a database to analyze data. But for example, you might have millions and millions of records, and you might want to just snapshot the sales figures for monthly at the monthly level that it will execute like instantly in Power BI. It will do that aggregation very, very fast, and you want to just snapshot that data to have to say like, okay, that the sales figure yesterday it was 11, it was 11 million, and tomorrow it's 11 million and half. So you can use the APIs to use this kind of data integration scenarios. You can build alerting systems. So if something changes, send me an alert. You can use it on websites, integrations, on app integration. So you are showing a Power BI report inside your website, and you have a KPI that from that Power BI report that you want to embed on your website, not as an embedding Power BI report, but using a website, iCharts or whatever technology you want to use in JavaScript, and just show the number, but the number from a Power BI dataset without replicating the logic that is being done on a Power BI dataset. This API, it works on premium and shared, so we don't need premium to use it. If it was the XMLA provider, you need premium, but for this you don't. And it has some limitations that they are documented, so you cannot go crazy and execute queries in parallel, and every query that you do can only return back 100,000 rows. 100,000 rows. But one more time, if you need more than 1,100 rows, maybe the use case that you are applying is not the best one for the REST APIs. Okay. This is mostly for aggregated data. Now, and you don't need to write code to use it. For example, you can use Logic Apps or Power Automate and do, and I will demo that, called this REST API that is, it's like an alerting. So I want to show like an alerting scenario. Let me show you. So I have this Power Automate over here. That what it's doing is, and as I said in the beginning, I won't go into the details. I know that many of you probably is the first time that you are seeing Power Automate, but this is a low code or no code experience where I'm basically, it's something that I have this running every day at 9 a.m. And every day at 9 a.m. is going to execute this DAX query on my data set. And this DAX query is basically, so on my data set, I have the sales per employee, and I also have the sales of that employee today and the sales on that of the same employee last year. So I want to, for a specific date, and this is prefixing the date because it's a demo, but this will usually be the today date. It will be a dynamic variable. this is going to execute this query, and it's going to get the list of all the employees where the sales amount versus the sales amount last year is less than 0. So they are underperforming. So they are selling less. So I'm going to execute this query on a data set. So I'm using some variables. This is Power Automate best practice. And I'm going to call that data sets the execute queries API. So I'm using the API. It's basically try to zoom in. So data set ID / execute queries, and the payload of the API is I just need to put the queries. What's the query that I want to execute, and then with the results, I'm going to send an email, and I'm going to send an email to all the managers or the manager of or a specific manager with a CSV table and a HTML result inside of the email. So if I run this, let me show you the end result. What will happen is this will execute that query on my Power BI dataset, and I shall be getting an email just arrived with a list of all the employees that are underperforming, and I can even get the CSV that the manager, because they want to see things in Excel, they can use it. So this is one example of the things. And look, I didn't write any code, okay? And I write the code, but I didn't write any code. This is just using Power Automate, few activities, and you can get some insane value. Okay, something that will run automatically, and whenever it detects a new pattern, and you can write whatever query you want. Okay, using all those KPIs that you already have on your data set. So this is why for me this is the coolest API from all. So another thing, and I'm not going into much detail because I have a session just on this topic, is you can use the APIs for monitoring purposes. So you can, and monitoring, it's the difference between knowing and guessing. Okay, if you have any kind of responsibility in a Power BI tenant, admin responsibility, or even an important development responsibility, you need to know what's happened. What is happening? Who are the most important users? Who are the most important reports? The reports that are not getting used and you are still giving support. So the APIs, you can use the APIs to get two pieces of information from the Power BI tenant. You can get everything that exists on the Power BI tenant, and you can get the activity from a Power BI tenant. So, and the end result, one more time, I have some links in here to the open source solution to build everything that I'm about to show you. And there is also a full session just talking on this topic. But let me show you the final result. So the final result is it's a report like this that is going through the data collected from the APIs. And this will get you like a complete tenant monitoring solution that you can see how many users you have, what's the activity in January. You can click on January and see the most active user. You can see the most active workspace, the most active app, the most active data set, what's the most active hours. You can drill through and go to the details of the activity, what's happened, what browser the user is using, from which IP address. So you can get all this information using, in this case, is the admin activity API. And another thing, and I think that's the question that I got asked, you can also get the catalog. So you can get all the workspaces, and for each workspace, what's the data sets that exists inside of the workspace. So I have a bug in here, the data flows, the apps. So you can get not only what's happening, but also what exists. So what's the data sources? So what the name of the servers, the file system files. So in these tenants, most of the data sets, they connect to files. What are the name of the files, the paths of the files? And also you can also get permission levels. So you can get you can see, for example, I want to know who got access to this application. And you can see from the application all the users that get access to the application. And you can also do the other way around. You can click on a user and see what that user, no, actually, this is the user. So you can click on a user and see what does that user have access to. Okay, this is for InfoSec queries, is very, very useful. And so just an overview about what you can get, but the solution, it's all APIs. So this is basically an Azure function running PowerShell scripts that goes to the REST APIs, gets that data, store it in the blob storage, and analyze it in the Power BI reports. But the APIs, these are all the APIs that I'm using. So I'm using the activity logs APIs. There are links to each API. I'm using the scanner APIs. The scanner APIs got released last year. It greatly improved the performance of scanning a whole tenant. Just for you to get an idea, you can scan a 50,000 workspace tenant in a few minutes. Get everything, all the workspaces, all the data sets, all the data sources, all the lineage about that, all that, the lineage and the metadata about the data sets, so the tables, the measures about of every data set. You can get this in minutes. And the question that I got asked is, how can you get the works? The question was the data sets and the workspaces, the relationship. So data sets on which workspace that data set is. I think it was that. But first, when you scan the workspace, you get that relationship, because for each workspace that gets scanned, it's a JSON, so it's a hierarchy, and inside of that workspace, you get the data sets. But you can also use another API that is the Get Groups API. You can even call this as an admin. No, not this one. It's this one. Get Groups as an admin, and this will get you all the groups inside of a tenant. And if you use this expand property, and on the expand property, if you put data sets, this will get all the workspaces, and inside of the JSON of each workspace, you get all the data sets. Okay, so I know this was really fast, but if you are interested on this, just follow this link. You will learn more about it. It's a GitHub repo. Let me try just to open it. I'm not the best guy in terms of documentation at all, but on this one I made some effort. So I tried to document the whole thing, how to install, if you can run it locally, you can run it in Azure, how can you deploy on Azure. So I tried to do a good job on documentation in here. I also get some help from the community, which is great. Okay, and let's leave the questions to the end. I don't know if there is any question. I just want to show all the scenarios. So I have like 10 minutes, right?
Yep, that's fine, Rui. No problem at all.
Okay. So let me show you this. This is a new one because I made this session other times, and this is I just created this demo today. There is a new API called Async Refresh API. So it's an API, so you can use the API to refresh data sets and refresh data flows. This is only for data sets at the moment, but the API, the previous API, is synchronous. So you call it and you need to wait. And if something goes wrong, if the data set takes a lot of time to refresh, it will cancel, and that will cancel the refresh as well. So the async API is a little bit different. So the async refresh API, and this is documented. You can find the documentation on Microsoft Docs. It's async, so it's a fire and forget. So you call it, and you can close your script. You can close your computer, no problem. It will stay refresh. It will execute on the server. It will execute on Power BI, and that's the biggest. But because it's not synchronous, so you don't call and you don't wait, then you need to call for a status. So you get an ID that you need to store, and then you use that ID to call another API to see the status of the refresh. It will tell you things, okay, it will tell you if the refresh has ended or not. And this Async Refresh API also has some great enhancements. So it allows you to do auto retry. So if the refresh failed, it will try again for the amount of times that you want to do. and something, and this one is my favorite. It's a batched commit. So if you send a lot of objects to refresh, because you can use the Async API not only to refresh the whole database, but to refresh a single table of a data set, or a multiple, or a partition of a table. You can run it as a whole transaction. So if a single table fail in 3 tables that you are trying to refresh, it will roll back the whole thing. But you can also execute it as a batch. So whenever it executes and commits, it will commit that the ones that executed successfully will commit. The ones that didn't execute successfully won't commit. So on this one, I will show it. It's a PowerShell script. You can see that it's not a very complex PowerShell script. So basically, it's a PowerShell. This is also on my GitHub, by the way. It's in this link over here, sample script. This will take you to a repo that I call it PBI script repo, and all the code is in here, so you can download it and use it on your own. But the script, what it's doing is it has a parameter like saying, okay, what's the workspace and the dataset ID that you want to refresh? What's the type of the refresh? If it's a full, if it's a clear. You can also use this to just clear all the data. This is also important on premium because you might not have the memory available to do a full refresh, because every time you do a full refresh, it will double. You need to double the memory for the data set. The amount of parallelism that you want to apply. So the parallelism is if you want to, let's say you execute the refresh on 20 tables, you can, the default is 6. You can say, okay, I want to execute 3 I want to execute the 20, but I want to execute 3 in batches of 3, because I want to minimize the impact on my database. Okay, you can even increase this. There is a limit. I think it's 20 or so, but you can even increase the default. Then you also have the commit mode, and this is the most important part, is the objects. What I want to refresh on my data set. And this is also something that you cannot do in a UI. Because if you want to refresh a data set today, it will refresh the whole thing, all the tables. But sometimes you just want to refresh one table because you are just publish the new column on that table. And you don't want to refresh all the tables in the model. And you can use the APIs for that as well. So on the objects is where, for example, on this refresh, I'm going to refresh the product table, one partition from my sales table, and another partition from my sales table. I'm going to refresh 2 partitions from my sales table and the product table. So 3 objects. And the API basically goes like this. So you authenticate. I'm not authenticated with a service principal just for simplicity, but you should use a service principal in here. So I'm going to post. I'm going to call the refreshes API and post this refresh, and then I'm just waiting for the refresh to happen. And you can only execute one async refresh per dataset. That's why I start by getting the refresh. If something is happening, I just move forward and wait for it to end. So that's why there is this if statement over here. So if I run it, okay, it's doing the authentication. And then it's posting a refresh command, and now it will wait. So you can see, so it executed. It is executing. I could just stop my script now, but of course that I want to wait and I want to give the status. So it's just waiting and sleeping every time it waits. So it's getting the status of that refresh, and the status is using another API. It's the groups, datasets, refreshes, and the refresh ID. That's the ID you need to store whenever you call the async refresh. So this is insanely useful for those more enterprise level, more advanced scenarios, but this is very, very useful. I was very happy that the product group released this API. I think it really makes the whole experience of refresh much more reliable. Especially on those. So it just ended, so completed, and it executed in 51 seconds. Okay. So async refresh APIs, it's worth you need to take a look at it. Another thing that you can do with APIs is DevOps Operations. And I also have a project in my GitHub called PBI DevOps that explains a little bit more about this, how can you run it. But the idea is basically this, is automate the whole experience of publishing not only the data sets, but the workspaces, the reports of the data sets, the paginated reports that I want to publish. So it's kind of, this can also be useful on tenant migrations. But the idea is you declare your deployment strategy. You have your only and single development files. And then whenever you want to publish, and you want to publish to different environments, production, dev, you use some scripts to do the deployment. You don't do it manually, because believe me, if you have multiple environments and you are doing it manually, of course that if you have premium and you want to really do this in the proper way, XMLA, BIM files, and Azure DevOps, okay? If you don't have premium, or if you are not comfortable working with the BIM files, maybe this can be for you, because this will be better than doing it manually. Because manually, believe me, you will make mistakes. Okay, you will make mistakes. You will deploy a report that is binded to the development data set, and people will get angry. So if you do it in a script and you test the script won't ever do a mistake, because it's scripted. It will just work. So let me just show you really quick how this works. So GitHub, maybe I have a lot of GitHub things. So this is what you will get in the end. I cannot zoom it, this one, I'm sorry. Maybe this, okay. In the end, you get, you have a script called the deploy. Let me open it on Visual Studio Code. Maybe here it will be better. Yes. So you have a deploy script, and the deploy script is it just have some variables. So if I want to deploy workspaces, data sets, and reports, I don't want to deploy paginated reports. And it has, and this is the most important thing, it has a configuration file. The configuration file is where you will declare your strategy. You will declare all the workspaces that you want to create and want to make sure that they exist. So the data sets workspace, the reports workspace, the name of the workspace. Let's go crazy and create some new ones. UK user group. I want to create some workspaces. I want to create the whole environment from scratch. So this workspace doesn't exist. You can even assign the permissions, making sure that the workspaces have the proper permissions. You declare the data sets that you have. You can have multiple. In here, I just have one. So my PBIX needs to be deployed into this workspace, and the parameters of that PBIX, and this is another best practice, whenever you have a Power BI file connecting to a server or API, whatever, use parameters, because otherwise you cannot use this DevOps technique. So parameters is a really best practice. Always use parameters. So in this environment, I want to target this database. For example, on dev, it's a different database. It's not I could be connecting to a different database than on prod and production. And then on the reports, I'm saying that the customer PBIX needs to be deployed to this workspace that is declared in the top, and it needs to be binded to this data set that's going to be published. So we are not talking about having that nasty stuff of a PBIX for dev, a PBIX for production. No, I only have one. I only have one PBIX. It's a development PBIX, but whenever I deploy, I will deploy to the proper workspace, and I will make sure that the reports, when they get deployed, they will be binded to the data set of this configuration. Okay, if I run the deploy for dev, then the reports that get published will be binded to the dev data set. Okay, so everything is declared in here, and now I just need to run. So if I run it, this is going to use the APIs to import, to publish the data sets. It's going to use the rebind APIs to make sure that the report is binded to the proper data set. And you can see that I didn't have, so I have a version of in my folders. I have the data sets, and I also have the PBIX for my reports, and the script will create the whole environment automatically. So it will create the workspaces, it will upload the data set, it will deploy the reports, and it will bind the reports to the proper reports online. So this is all the logs. So if I go to my Power BI tenant, let's just refresh, I will have in here, and I promise that I didn't create the workspaces before, I will have all those workspaces, UK user group demo, the data set. So the data set will be on this workspace. And the reports, for example, the customer report, that if I see the lineage is connecting to the data set on the UK user group demo data sets workspace, and everything will be working. And now you ask me, that workspace didn't exist, so the data set didn't exist. So what's the data set that the my local file is connecting? It's connecting to the data set in dev. That's why and I need to declare on the configuration file. That's why I need to declare what's the data set that this report needs to be binded once I publish it. And then here I'm using one of the most important APIs, in my opinion, to make you productive is the rebind APIs, because bad things happen. Okay, sometimes you will get a data set that will get corrupted, or you'll get a problem, and you need to rebind. You have the reports connecting to data sets, let's say data set B, and you want to bind them to data set A. And you don't need to download. And believe me, I've seen customers doing this, like downloading 100 reports by hand and going to Power BI Desktop and rewinding that to the new data set and spending like a couple of days doing some click work. You don't need to do it. You have an API that you can, and it's instant. So you upload that new data set A, and using the APIs, you can just rebind all the reports connecting to dataset B to dataset A. And as usual, I have a script for that. It's called the automatic rebinding script. And this script over here, it's scripts. It's rebind as an admin. So if you are an admin, you can. If you are not an admin, there is another way to do it. But if you are an admin, this is easy, because this is basically, sorry, let me show it here. So rebind as an admin. So what this script has as a parameter is what's the old data set and what's the new data set. I'm not saying the reports. I'm just saying I wanna all the reports that connect to this old data set A, to be connected to data set B. And the script, what it's going to do is, as an admin, it will get all the workspaces. I think this was one of the other questions. It will get all the workspaces, and for each workspace, what's the reports and the data sets that exists inside of each workspace, and it will get for the it will basically create an array, a variable with the workspace ID, the type of the workspace, the report ID, and the data set. So I know for a specific data set, what's all the reports from all the workspaces that connects to that data set. And then it's very easy. I just need to, get me all the data sets, all the reports that use the old data set that have the old data set as the data set ID property. And then it's just looping all those workspaces, all those reports, and calling the rebind API. That basically it's this API. I need to go to that workspace, the report, and rebind it to the new data set. And this will instantly, I think I can show you. I have here rebind reports. So for example, if I see the lineage on dataset A, so everything is connected right now to dataset B, right? And I have some reports in the same workspace, but if you do the show impact across workspaces, I have other reports from other workspaces. If I run the script, so I want to go from actually from dataset B to dataset A, so I need to swap these two. Okay. If I run the script, look, this will run in seconds. Authentication, and just did the rebind. So it went and finds all the reports that connected to the old data set. And now, if I refresh this page, now dataset B will be empty, and dataset A will have all the reports. Now, this, if your situation is like this, you have 3-5 reports, do it by hand. Forget the APIs, you will spend more time in this. If you have hundreds, please don't do it by hand. Remember that guy from Portugal showed you a script, and you can do it by scripts, and you can ask, and it may be worth it to even pay a consultant to do it for you if you don't know how to write and use the APIs, because doing it by hand on hundreds of reports, it's bad. So no one likes to do that. Okay. So I'm getting to the end of the presentation. No, I won't do any more demos. I just want to also talk about this one. One thing that you can also do with the API is assign the premium capacities. And the reason why I want to talk about this one is because more and more we are been talking about premium. Sometimes you have in premium per user, and then you go and migrate to premium capacity. You want on Gen 1 and you want to go to Gen 2. Maybe on Gen 2 you will create a new capacity. You want to control the whole thing. You can also have scripts to assign the premium capacity to workspaces. So this is the whole script. So it's a few lines of code. And you don't need to go for each workspace, like hundreds of workspaces, and change the capacity and spend. Not as the other one, maybe spend a couple of hours doing that manual work. You can also do it with the APIs, and it's very, very, very useful. It's using the assign workspace to capacity APIs. So as a recap, so APIs will avoid you doing repetitive work. So if you are doing some kind of management work and DevOps work manually over and over and over and over again, think if there is an API that can help you. One example, I was working with a customer a few days ago, and so whenever they wanted to assign a new user to that, they basically the IT person, it was an IT person. Sometimes she received a request to assign a user to a workspace, and when that happened, she went to the admin portal. There is a workspace option there. She searched for the workspace and assigned the user, and on every ticket she spent like 10 minutes, because they have a lot of workspaces. It takes some time to load all the workspaces. I teach her to write a script to do it, and now she does it in 1 second or 2. Whenever she gets a request, okay, I want to add this user to that workspace, she just run the script, put the new user as a variable, and it's done. So avoid the repetitive work. APIs can really, really make you excel and make you much more productive. And you can build your own collection of reusable scripts that you can use all the time. So if you noticed, have a few. So this is like my personal collection of scripts that I always have that I keep in my pocket. So thank you. Sorry for the overhead and that Zoom problem. I need to figure out what's happened, and I hope that you learned something today. I don't know if there is any questions, and I'm happy to answer.
Fantastic, Rui. First of all, thank you very much for cramming so much into such a short session. I think everybody's learned some more about the API there and the wonderful things that can be achieved with it. So thank you very much for that. We do have a couple of questions I'll just pose to you if that's okay. So we have an anonymous question which has come in. When you were doing the DAX query against the data set using Power Automate, what was the connection? The connector that you used for the DAX variable in Power Automate?
The connector, it's HTTP connector.
Excellent, thank you. And we have another question coming in from Stephen. And Stephen asks, what is the best way to get activity metrics? So in this instance, usage of a report page.
Today, you don't have it. There is some roadmap about that. That it may appear that that data may be available as well on the activity, but today you don't have an API to get the page telemetry, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you very much. Another question coming in from Stephen. He asks, what do you recommend to analyze the DAX queries sent to multiple data sets across multiple workspaces, as he finds log analytics to be kind of limited to one workspace?
Yeah, that's log analytics is the answer. Okay, log analytics can be very, very useful to debug. So log analytics is what will give you a way to trace a query that maybe overloaded your capacity and you want to know which query, which user, which report, which visual. Log analytics will get you the answer. So it's insanely useful to keep it active. Unfortunately, you are right. You need to create a different log analytics for each workspace, and if you have a ton of workspaces, that can be challenging. What you can do today is you can try to position all the corporate and most important data sets in the same workspace, and then have log analytics on that workspace. But the log analytics will GA in April, or that's the estimate on the ETA it's still in preview. And one of the features that is announced that will be available on general availability is having log analytics for the whole tenant or the capacity. So that will kind of take that limitation away of a workspace one-to-one relationship. But today, yes, unfortunately, you need to create a log analytics for each workspace. As a workaround, you can try to move at least the most critical data sets to a single workspace and have log analytics there. I also understand some reasons why you don't want to do it, but that's something that you may consider today to avoid having multiple log analytics.
Excellent, thank you. And the next question comes in from Grant. It's more of an IDE question. How do you find PowerShell with VS Code? He finds PowerShell IntelliSense to be very slow with it.
Actually, I don't have any complaints about it, and I don't have a supercomputer, so I use a Surface Book. And maybe, I don't know, I don't have that experience. So, but no, I cannot really. So for my standards, it's good enough. But it could be maybe, I don't know, maybe you have a lot of extensions. There could be some problem with your the VS Code instance. I don't know, but for my standards, I enjoy it. I really like. My favorite thing is I can run on multiple PowerShell environments, so I can switch between PowerShell Core and PowerShell V3 or V5 and V7. So PowerShell Core, it's a PowerShell version that can run anywhere. And my favorite one is this restart current session. So whenever I got some issues and I want to just make sure that I start from scratch, I just click here and this will restart the whole PowerShell environment, which is something that I appreciate. But regarding the IntelliSense, the experience I got is good. So as you can see, it's not that bad.
Excellent, thank you, Rui. And the last question is, in terms of your slide deck, is it possible to share that with the wider audience following this session?
Yeah, it's all right there. So if you go to my GitHub, you will find session slides. There is a repo called session slides, and it's already there. Actually, I need to update it because I have a new slide from the previous presentation. So you can just maybe I'm not sure if I can share a link with all of you, but it's already there. So just find me on GitHub, Rui Romano, and repo is session slides, and that's it. The slides.
Perfect. I have posted your GitHub previously in the chat. I've just posted it again. I've also posted the link that you've just sent across for the session slides there as well. So thank you very much for that, Rui. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you with us.
It was my pleasure, and thank you for inviting me. And one more time, I hope that it was worth your time.
Oh, definitely. Without a doubt, we'd love to have you back again with us in the future. And also, thank you very much to everybody in the community that's joined us today. I hope you've learned a lot in such a short space of time. And if not, please do reach out to Rui. He has a lot of information and content available on his WordPress blog, which is available in the Q&A, and also on YouTube as well. So thank you very much again for joining us. This Microsoft Power BI UK user group session has been brought to you in association with Onyx Data, and you could have been anywhere in the world, but you've been here with us. So take care and stay safe.